So glad you chose to be here to be a part of our next message in a series on the storyteller. The storyteller is none other than Jesus. Nobody told stories like him. When he told a story, it made you feel like that's me in that story. He told stories to help us experience a better life. Just like the story today that I call and many people refer to as the story of the persistent widow and the unjust judge. It's a very short story. What I want to do is read through it and then think about the details that we read. Let's read what Jesus said. There was in a certain city a certain judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. And a widow was in that city, and she kept coming to him saying, "Give justice to me against my adversary." And for a while, he was unwilling. But after a while, he said to himself, "Even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I'll give justice to her, lest by continually coming, she wears me out." And that's the end of the story. Let's look at what we just read a little more closely. There was in a certain city a certain judge who did not fear God and did not respect man. Just two things that are said about him. To fear God means to be afraid of God. He wasn't afraid of God. He really didn't care what God thought about what he did as judge. He wasn't thinking, I hope God feels good about the decision I'm making here. I hope God isn't angry with me about the decision I made. I hope he'll be pleased with me. He didn't care what God thought. He had no fear of God in the present. He had no fear of God in the future because he wasn't thinking, what I do today, I'm going to give an account for someday when I stand before him. He wasn't afraid of that. He just had no fear of God. And not only that, he didn't respect man. He didn't care what people thought about him or his decisions. You feel like you've been done wrong? He doesn't care. You want to present your case before him and hope that he'll listen? He doesn't want to hear it. You want him to have some compassion toward you and toward your problem? You're not going to get it from him. And that was a real problem for the widow that Jesus just told us about in that city, because she'd been done wrong and she needed help from a judge. And the two things she needed most from a judge would be that he would fear God and he would respect man, but she doesn't have a judge to go to like that. She's 0 for 2 on what she would hope for in a judge. So what does she do? What's she going to do? Well, here's what she did do. She kept coming to him saying, give justice to me against my adversary. Now notice she has an adversary. That means somebody did her wrong. Now Jesus doesn't tell us what it was that this person did wrong toward her. We don't know if this person stole from her. We don't know if this person assaulted her. We don't know that maybe this person could have done something to seize her dead husband's assets where she couldn't get to them. I don't know. We don't know. Jesus didn't tell us those details. It's just that she had an adversary. And two more things. She called out for justice, and she kept coming to him. She called out for justice. Now, the word justice means justice, but it comes from a root word that means right. And I want us to think about all of this morning in terms of the word, not just justice, but the word right. She wanted what was right to be done on her behalf. and what was right to be done toward her adversary. That's what she wanted. Give me what is right. Do what is right when it says, give me justice. It also says she kept coming to him. Now, I want to take some liberties here with that statement and kind of paraphrase what Jesus is really saying based on what he's going to say next. What he's really saying here is she kept coming to him, and 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 she kept coming to him. Kind of get the drift? We know that because of what follows. She just kept coming to him. I mean, that poor judge, he'd get up in the morning and eat breakfast and get dressed and step out the door to walk across town to the courthouse. And no sooner does he step out the door, and there's that woman. Good morning, Judge. How are you today? Do you mind if I walk with you to the courthouse? I have something I'd like to talk to you about. It's about this person that's done me wrong. And I just want you to listen. I hope that you'll pay attention to what I have to say and that I can find some compassion from you and that you'll consider to hear my case and give justice. And probably he didn't have much to say because he was on his way to work. But finally he gets to the office and he says, oh, what a relief. I can shut the door and focus on what I need to do. And the problem was he had to go home at the end of the day. So he leaves the office, steps out the door, and guess who's there? This widow. Good evening, Judge. I hope you had a good day. Do you mind if I walk with you on your way home? And on the way home, she says, now let me remind you of what I told you this morning, and I just want to go over that with you again. Now, of course, I don't know that it happened like that. I don't know that she met him at the door in the morning and at the office door in the evening. I don't know that she walked with him across town. I don't know that. I'm just trying to get us to think about what this might have felt like a little bit, because Jesus said she just kept coming to him. I don't know where she came to him. I don't know what she exactly said, except give justice to me against my adversary. But it went on for a while. In fact, that's what Jesus tells us next. For a while, he was unwilling. Now, how long is for a while? He doesn't tell us. How long did this go on, that she just kept coming to him and coming to him and coming to him? I don't know. It could have been days. It could have been weeks. It could have been a month. It could have been months. I don't know how long for a while is, but I do know that for a while, the judge held his ground. He was unwilling to grant her the justice that she was asking for. What was he thinking? Well, no doubt he was thinking, I'm going to hold out, I'm not going to give in, and eventually she'll wear out and she'll quit coming. I'll just wait her out, and eventually she'll give up and she'll quit coming. He'd probably been successful with that strategy with others, so he figured it was going to work with her. But as Jesus goes on to say, after a while, notice, for a while, after whatever it was, after days, after weeks, after months, I don't know how long it was, but after a while, where before he was unwilling, now he's willing, and he said to himself, and Jesus tells us what he said to himself. This is what he was thinking, and we're going to get an inside view of what this judge was thinking. Here it is. Even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give justice to her, lest by continually coming she wears me out. Notice in the middle, I'm going to give justice to her. I'm going to do what she thinks is right. I'm going to give her what she thinks is right. That's what I'm going to do. Now, why did he come to that conclusion that he would give justice to her and do what's right? Is it because all of a sudden he got convicted by God And all of a sudden he thought, oh, I'm just kind of fearful of what God's going to think of me if I don't, listen to this woman and have compassion and do what's right for her. Is it because he feared God? No, he says, it's not because I fear God. That didn't change. I still don't fear God. Well, is it because all of a sudden he felt guilty about the way he'd been treating men, treating people, where he didn't have respect for people, and now all of a sudden he sees the light and said, I really ought to show more compassion and kindness and more of a sense of fairness in my responsibility. I've got a newfound respect for people, and that's why I want to, do what's right for this woman. Is that why he gave justice to her? Nope. He didn't change at all. He didn't fear God, and he didn't respect man, and that's what he says about himself. I do not fear God, and I don't respect man. Why then did he do what she wanted him to do? Why did he do what she felt was right? Well, we don't have to guess. He says it 3 different ways. First, he says, it's because this widow bothers me. This woman bothers me. And second, he says, she keeps continually coming. That's why. And the one I like the most is the last line. She wears me out. I am worn out. I can't take it anymore. I got to get some relief. So I'm going to give her justice. Because I know if I do what she's been bugging me to do, she's going to leave me alone. And that's why he did it. Jesus calls him later an unjust judge. He didn't do it because he was a just judge. He did it for pragmatic reasons. And that's to just get some relief from this woman. And that's the end of the story. What a strange story. I mean, it's kind of cute. It's engaging. But what's the point? I mean, if this is all that we had, we wouldn't know. What's this got to do with me? I mean, what's the point here? I'm not a widow crying for justice, and I don't know that I've got a judge that won't listen to me. And even if I did, is this what I'm supposed to do, is go down to the courthouse and bug? I mean, what's this about? We don't have to guess what it's about. Why did Jesus tell us this story? We don't have to guess. We're told exactly why Jesus told this story in a statement that was given to us before he told it, in verse 1. He told a parable to them that one must always pray and not lose heart. Now, the word parable is kind of like a synonym for story. He told a story to them, a parable to them. What's the point of the story? It's about prayer. This is a story to teach us about prayer. What is it that this story teaches about prayer? What is it that Jesus wants us to gain from the story? That one must always pray and not lose heart. See that word one? I would like you, if you would, to put your name there in your mind. I'll put mine in there, and I'll start with me. Told a parable to them that Bob must always pray and not lose heart. Told a parable to them that Bill must always pray and not lose heart. Told a parable to them that Mary must always pray and not lose heart. Put your name in there, because he is talking to you. He is speaking to you right now and saying to you, you must pray, always pray, and not lose heart. Now, notice the word must. He didn't say should always pray or ought to always pray, although I am aware that some translations translate that word as should or ought. That is sad. That's unfortunate that any translation would translate it anything but the word must. This is an intentional word used here, and it's the predominant translation of the word in the New Testament. Jesus was very fond and familiar with the word must. Let me give you some examples. He said that he must be lifted up on the cross, and he must rise from the dead, and that you must be born again. So that's pretty good examples of the use of the word must. I mean, Jesus didn't say, well, you know, I ought to be lifted up on the cross, or maybe I should be raised from the dead, or you ought to be born again. No, must means must. And this word is a strong word in the New Testament, and it is translated correctly as I have it up here. Must. You must always pray and not lose heart. So now we need to think, well, if that's the word, and I must always pray, what does that mean? Because the truth is, I think it's the truth. It's the truth for me. I'll bet it's the truth for you, that I don't always pray. Do you always pray? I mean, have you had a day in your life where you didn't pray? I'll bet you have. Have you had 2 or 3 days where you didn't pray? I mean, you really didn't pray. I mean, you might have just said a quick little prayer, but you really didn't pray. You really didn't pray. You really didn't talk to your Father in heaven. Could be that you've had a period in your life where you went for a week without really praying, or weeks without praying. Maybe in some cases, months without praying. But you know, even if you go a day or 2 or 3, then you're not always praying. And yet Jesus said you must. So what's that must mean? What do you mean must? You know, all of us have struggled. All of us have lost heart when it comes to prayer. All of us have struggled with prayer. All of us have gone through a day or days, weeks, I don't know, where we didn't pray. But I can tell by looking at you, it didn't kill you. You're still alive. What's that must? What's that mean? You must pray or you're going to die? No, you didn't die. I didn't die. So what's the must about? Well, I think whenever you raise the word must, you need to also think, or else what? What if I don't? If I must, then what if I don't? And that's where I think can help us to think, why must we always pray? Or else? What's going to happen if we don't? Well, I'll tell you. You sang it earlier, I want to be close to you. Boy, the group here was really singing that song. I don't know if you were as an individual, but the group was. And you probably sang it. I hope you did like you meant it. And I'm sure if I asked you, you want to be close to God? You want to grow closer to God? Probably your answer would be yes. Well, I want to tell you here today on the authority of the Word of God, you can't grow closer to God without prayer. You just can't. You and I can't grow close to anybody if we don't communicate with them. I mean, growing in a relationship with somebody demands that we communicate, that we talk, we listen. You can't grow closer to God without prayer. You just can't, because you're not communicating with Him. You're not talking to Him. So you must always pray if you want to keep growing closer to God in your relationship with God. Here's another thing. You know, you and I can't experience the full blessing of God in our lives if we don't always pray. We can't experience answers to prayer if we're not praying. We can't experience more of God's involvement in our lives if we're not praying. And you know, someday we're going to stand before Christ. We're going to be with Him in a future kingdom. We're going to be with Him forever. Some believers will be closer to Christ. Some believers will not be as close to Christ. And you know that part of the reason that He will decide where you are in relation to Him is your prayer, is how you did when it came to prayer, how I did when it came to prayer. If we've been always praying and not losing heart, that's going to mean we're going to be closer to Jesus. The closer we are to Him now, the closer we'll be to Him forever in a future kingdom. So I've just given some examples of why You and I must always pray and not lose heart. To lose heart means not always pray. I know how easy it is to lose heart when it comes to prayer. You kind of get frustrated, get discouraged, you can't seem to find time or to make time, and you tend to just not be able to focus like you want to. I understand that. It's easy to lose heart when it comes to prayer. Listen, that's why Jesus told the story. Here it is. He told a parable to them that one must always pray and not lose heart. He told the story to encourage us, to help us to always pray and not lose heart. So in this verse, we learn why Jesus told the story, but there's no explanation as to how it works. How can the story help us? He reserves that for after the story. After the story, he explains to us how the story relates to you and me and how it can help you and me to always pray and not lose heart. So here's how he introduced his explanation of what the story should mean to you and me. After he tells the story, he says this: hear what the unjust judge said. Jesus said, okay, I told the story. Now, did you pay attention? Did you pay attention to what the unjust judge said? I think you paid attention, but it's easy to forget. Let's go back and look again at what he said. Here's what he said. Even though I do not fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow bothers me, I will give justice to her, lest by continually coming she wears me out. Jesus said, hear what that unjust judge said. Because, Jesus says, what I'm going to tell you next is about God your Father. And I want you to think about and pay attention to how different your Father in heaven is than this judge. And here's what he says about your Father in heaven. Now, shall not God do justice for his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? And yet he's patient with them. I tell you that he will do justice for them speedily. God will do justice. God will do justice for them speedily. God is not an unjust judge, just the opposite. He is a God who does justice. Says it twice, at the beginning and the end of his main point. God will do justice. He will do it for them speedily. Now, for whom does God do justice? Don't miss this. It's for his chosen ones. Now, who are the chosen ones? Well, I think that most of you in the room qualify here, because the chosen ones are the children of God. If you're one of God's children, you are a chosen one in the eyes of God. You know, not everybody in the world, however, is a child of God, contrary to what you may have heard, what we all probably have heard. We're all God's children. Well, that's not in the scriptures. God doesn't teach that in the Bible. In fact, in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, we're told that to be a child of God, you have to be given the right. And the only people that have been given the right to become children of God are those that have believed in Jesus for everlasting life. So, if you've believed in Jesus for everlasting life, you are a child of God, you are a chosen one of God. And your Father in heaven wants to do justice for you. And you know, God will do justice for his chosen ones, but not all of them. And that might take you back a little bit. He doesn't do justice for all of his children. Well, that's not what he said here. He says he does it for his chosen ones who cry to him day and night. The sentence doesn't end in the second line. It continues in the third line. God will do justice for his chosen ones, his children, who cry to him, who pray to him day and night. Because God responds to prayer. You have a Father who responds to your prayers. You know, we're told elsewhere in Scripture that you have not because you ask not. That truth is found right here. If you're not crying to him day and night, how can you expect him to be involved in doing what's right for you? Jesus is saying, if you cry to him day and night, if you cry out to him in prayer, if you always pray, you must always pray. If you want your Father in heaven to respond with justice, by giving you justice, by giving you what is right for you and what is good for you. And that leads me to say, well, what's good for you? Well, I know what's good for me. Yeah, you think you do. You know, I'm talking to myself right now. I think I know what's best for me. And I've let God know what I think's best for me. And sometimes I think God has agreed with me. But I know for sure that lots of times God doesn't agree with me. He knows what's best for me better than I do. He knows what's right and good for me better than I do. Good illustration in the New Testament. You know, Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, had his famous thorn in the flesh. You know, he had a physical problem. He didn't like it. And he repeatedly asked God to take it away. And God heard his prayer. And God said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to leave you with that thorn in the flesh because my power is going to be perfected in your weakness. I'm going to do great things through that thorn in the flesh in your life, Paul. So Paul came to God with what he thought was right. God said, no, I know what's better, Paul, and that's what I'm going to do here. And I want you to relate to that because you can have faith that you have a Father in heaven who hears your prayer. He knows what your request is. He knows that you think this is what would be best or good or right. He's heard you, and he's going to answer according to what he knows is really best for you and for me. And sometimes it's what we thought. Sometimes it might be a little bit different. Notice it says, they cry to him day and night, and yet he's patient with them. You know, here's where we can see the persistent widow, can't we? This is what the story of the persistent widow says to us. We need to be like that widow. You and I need to be like that widow. We need to keep coming, and we need to keep coming, and we need to keep coming. And don't quit. Day and night, keep coming. Keep coming to our Father with whatever it is that's on our heart. And don't quit. Oh, wait a minute. Won't he get tired of that? Doesn't he get tired of hearing me ask him the same thing? You know, the widow did. She asked the same thing over and over and over again. You ever wondered if God, gets tired of hearing you pray the same thing? By the way, do you tend to pray the same thing today that you prayed yesterday and the day before and the day before that? I mean, do your prayers seem, sometimes repetitive, where you say, doesn't God get tired? Doesn't my Father get tired of hearing me pray the same thing? Well, I hope not. In fact, I know not. But I can relate to that in my own life because I'll be honest with you, my prayers on one day sound a whole lot like my prayers on the day before. When I come to my Father, I want to praise him for who he is. And I want to praise my Father and Jesus and the Holy Spirit. And I try to, when I pray, not to word it exactly the same way every day, but I did that yesterday. And I did that the day before. In fact, I've done that time and time again, is just try to give praise to my Father for who he is. And, I try when I pray to pray for the return of Christ and the coming of the kingdom. But I prayed that the day before, and the day before that, and the day before that. And when I pray, I always pray for my wife and my children and my grandchildren and other family members and people in the church, that these people that I care about and love would grow in their relationship with God, and that some of them would get saved. But I prayed that yesterday, and I prayed that the day before. I've been praying that for I don't know how long. And those prayers sound a lot alike. Now, I could go on with examples, but, does God get tired of me praying for the same things? Here's the answer. He's patient with them. Cry to him day and night, and he's patient. He's more than patient. He is not the unjust judge who is irritated and saying, you wear me out. When are you going to quit? Just the opposite. He's completely the opposite of the unjust judge. He's saying, keep coming, keep talking, keep crying out day and night. Tell me the same thing you told me yesterday. That's great. Just keep communicating and crying out to me with your praises and your requests. I love to hear you come to me, always. You can understand now why Jesus said we ought always to pray and not lose heart. How could we not be motivated to pray more when we read about how God looks at us when it comes to prayer? Now notice these last two lines. I tell you that he will do justice for them speedily. The unjust judge didn't do it speedily at all. God does. When you come to him with a request, he responds immediately. Now, that doesn't mean he answers your request immediately and does what you've asked him to do immediately. What it means is he's involved immediately. He cares immediately. He answers immediately in terms of the request. And the answer might be, it's going to take a while. It's best that I not answer this or do this immediately because it's best for you that there be more time. So he's involved immediately, and that's the point. Speedily, immediately. What a motivation that is for us to pray always and not lose heart. That our Father is involved immediately when we come to him in prayer. We ought always to pray and not lose heart when we see what Jesus has told us about God, our Father, and how he feels about our prayers. And that could be the end right there. Jesus could have quit right there. I would have thought that he would, but he's Jesus. He's much smarter than me, and he knows better that there's more that we need to know because he doesn't stop there. He's got one more thing to say. And when I put it up on the screen, you're going to think, maybe you'll think, I did. When I studied this, I thought, what's going on here? Why did Jesus change the subject? He's been talking about prayer, and all of a sudden he changes the subject. At least that's what I thought, because here's what he says. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? He's talking about the second coming, and he's talking about faith. There's not a word in there about prayer. At least that's what I thought. But that would be very strange for Jesus to change the subject. He didn't change the subject. He's still talking about prayer. Instead of the word prayer, he uses the word faith because he's relating faith to prayer. Because, the greatest expression of faith, I think, is prayer. Because when you pray to God, you can't see him. Faith is the conviction of things not seen. You can't see God, and you're talking to somebody that you can't see. That takes faith. And in Hebrews 11, we're also told that without faith, it's impossible to please him, because he who comes to God by faith must believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those that seek him. When you come to God in prayer, you have to believe that he is, right? It's obvious. You have to believe that he's there, that he is. He can hear, that you're really talking to somebody that can hear you, and that he's going to reward your faith. He's going to reward you now and reward you in the future. He's going to respond to your prayer. That takes faith. And that's why Jesus is saying, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith? And in the context, he's saying, will he find you praying by faith? Will he find you praying by faith when he comes? Will he? When he comes, will he find you always praying and not losing heart? You know, that's really the focus that Jesus wants us to come away with is this is a subject that matters forever, because when the Son of Man comes and finds, will he find children praying? Will he find believers? Will he find his chosen ones praying? And the reason this is so important is when he comes, he's going to reward. He's going to give a place in the kingdom. And what we learn from Jesus here, as we do in other passages, is that the more you always pray, the greater will be your reward in a future kingdom. And the reward is to be closer to Jesus. That is the reward. Every believer will be in the kingdom in his presence. Some will be closer to him than others. And what Jesus is saying is, the closer you are to him now as you pray, always pray, the closer you will be to him in a future kingdom. That's why this is so important. That's why you must always pray and not lose heart. And that's the bottom line of the message. Jesus gives us the bottom line of what this story is about. In verse 1, here it is again. He told a parable to them that one must always pray and not lose heart. So it's safe to say that the bottom line of what he's teaching us in the story of the persistent widow and the unjust judge is captured right here in that line. Always pray and don't lose heart. Always pray and don't lose heart. May God help us to remember the story of the persistent widow and remember it often, that that she might be an inspiration to all of us to always pray and not lose heart. Well, I'm going to close us in prayer in a moment about what we've learned today. If you have a question about the message, I'll be here at the front. If you'd like to ask me a question, I'll try to answer it. But before I pray, I just want to say I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I hope this Thanksgiving will be very special to you. A Thanksgiving not only of closeness with those that you love, but a feeling of closeness to your Father in heaven. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much for this story. I need it. We all need it. Help us to be more like that persistent widow, knowing that you're not like the unjust judge. Help us, Father, to always pray and not lose heart. And for the difference that will make in our lives, we'll give you praise and we'll give you thanks. Amen. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next week.